Chris, I've known for a few years. I think I met you through the Lightning Jar, maybe?
Could be, yeah.
Well, anyway, known him for a couple of years. His wife owns the Bat and Kill Bookshop over in Cambridge, New York, which is an awesome little bookshop. And I'm going to read from his official bio. Chris is the Extension Associate Professor of Agricultural Engineering at UVM. His work focuses on the application of the engineering practice to food systems. Specific engagement is with food producers, processors, and distributors to improve efficiency, quality, safety, and cost control through the integration of technology, systems integration, and process controls. Boy, that's something only an engineer would love, right?
That's a different Chris.
Yeah, right. He has a BS in Mechanical Engineering and an MBA, both from RPI. Kimberly Griffin is currently the 4-H educator and Prosper team lead at UVM Extension. She's the Executive Director of Marble Valley Grows, and she has a undergraduate degree in architecture from Philadelphia, and promises to have an interesting story about how architecture led to farming. So, welcome to Chris and Kimberly.
Thank you for that introduction. I am Kimberly Griffin. I cover both Bennington and Rutland counties. I live in Rutland. I've been in this position for almost 5 years now. And essentially my job is to support adults who support youth. And of course to then support those youth. So 4-H has its roots in agriculture, but as our society has evolved, so has 4-H. And so we cover all project areas. We still cover horses and cows and bunnies and goats, but we also do robotics. We do photography, theater, a lot of STEM work. And in this county, we do shooting sports and robotics are our bigger projects. We have robotics clubs down here in Bennington and also in Manchester. And then statewide, we're covering all kinds of project areas. Essentially what I say is if there's a youth who has an interest in something, we will figure out how to support that interest in any way possible. That's my super quick overview of what is 4-H. And I wish we had our slides up because I really appreciated hearing you all do your opening pledge. We have an opening pledge, or we have a pledge in 4-H as well that is very much related. That is head, hands, heart, and health. And so I feel like Rotary and 4-H are certainly, there is a pathway there from littles to you all. So thank you. Thank you.
Kimberly promised that she'll be back to answer all your. Hi everybody, I'm Chris Callahan. As Dana said, I'm with UVM Extension. Both Kimberly and I are based out of the Bennington office. Does anybody know where the Bennington office of Extension is? However would you know?
I don't know.
Great, so we're right above Citizens Bank downtown, just this side of CCV on the second floor in that building. 310 Main Street, stop by, say hello anytime you'd like.
If the door's unlocked.
Yes, you can still stop by and say hello, just be saying hello to the door. So I'd like to begin, first of all, it's really nice to be with Rotary again. I've been able to speak to Rotary clubs quite a few times in the time I've been with UVM Extension, and I always go back and refresh my memory on the four-way test and find so many parallels with actually the work we do and the way we do it. And I hope to make some of those connections today, because there's a lot of them. I'd like to begin just a little bit to hear, how do you know Extension? What do you know of Extension? Maybe has anybody in the room been engaged with an Extension program that you know of?
More Cornell Extension. I know, actually I'm a lot more familiar with, just that they do so much, in Eastern New York.
Yep, so Eastern New York Cornell Cooperative Extension, or CCE, great.
Yeah.
Marsh?
Yeah. So when I was a kid, I used to wake up every morning to a voice that said, "Don't forget to drink your milk today." Remember who that was?
Yeah.
John Page, who was our agent for 100 years.
Right, John Page, so some John Page connections in the room, good. Yes, Mary, is it?
Decades ago, I actually worked for the Extension Service for the University of Delaware.
Fantastic.
And myself and a colleague did a summer-long project on doing how-tos for roadside vegetable sales, how to set up your signs, where to set up your signs, how to set up your displays, and it was quite fun.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
And we hope informative.
Yeah, they probably still exist. Have you Googled them? Yeah, they're probably out there.
I went to a cheese making seminar.
Fantastic.
It was right here in Fanning City.
How's it coming along?
I made cheese one time come out like salty rubber band.
Yeah.
I don't think we're
We'll
really.
leave it at the cabin.
Great. Okay, enough from him. Jane?
My daughter was in 4-H for many years, and we used to go down really early in the morning to the Topsfield Fair in Massachusetts to avoid traffic, to feed breakfast, and it was the best way to see the fair there was. But we were really deeply involved with 4-H until she hit, I think, high school.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Different state, Indiana. All my kids went through 4-H and raised a steer for one thing in the calf scramble, and they also raised goats, and I got involved in that goat raising process, and we had goats for about 6 years. So.
Yeah, it's great. As Kimberly alluded to, 4-H, we all think of 4-H as a kids activity, a youth activity, but it almost always involves the parents in some way. Yeah. Any other extension experiences? Master Gardener. So Beth, Matt is a UVM Extension Master Gardener, isn't he? Yeah. Master Gardener, another program. So Extension is a complex and interesting organization with a complex and interesting history. And I'm going to do my best to demystify it a little bit, because we have a lot of different programs and a lot of different program areas. So I want to talk a little bit about what we are, how we came to be, what we do, and then hear from the rest of you all what you think some opportunities might be. Because at the heart of what we do is our purpose is to cultivate healthy communities. And our mission in doing that is to provide and facilitate research. So is it truth? Education and outreach with our partners. Are we building relationships? Are we building goodwill? For the people of Vermont. So the people of Vermont, is it fair for everybody, and is it beneficial? So when I think of our mission and I think of what you all use as a 4-way test, that's where I see a lot of overlap. So it is really great to be here. So Extension is part of the land-grant university system. That's a mouthful. What is the land-grant university system? Does anybody know what that refers to? Yes, sir.
That was the act of Congress, I think. Justin Merle is the author of that bill in Vermont, and it set up all the land-grant colleges. So a certain amount of land was designated by the federal government to fund higher education. So IU, Purdue, Wisconsin, all the Big Ten, and UVM.
Cornell, Penn State. Fill in the list. There's universities in every state that are supported by that. Thank you. I should have had you do this portion. Would you like to keep going? Okay. So Justin Smith Morrill, he was a senator and a representative for over 40 years of his life for Vermont in Washington. And he drafted the bill called the Land Grant Act of 1862. And it established land grant scrip. And scrip was a claim on land. That land we're talking about was not really here, because by that time, most of what was here was already settled. It was out west. So this is part of our complex history. That land was taken from indigenous people. And then the proceeds of that have been used to establish the land grant university system and still pay people like me to this day. So some people call it the land grab system. And I just want to acknowledge that with you all and recognize that this is part of our complex history that we're wrestling with and continue to work toward. And it's part of the 4-way test. Is it fair to all? Is it beneficial? Let's hope so. I've got an obligation to make it beneficial because it wasn't fair. So 1862, Justin Smith Morrill. There's a Justin Smith Morrill homestead in Stafford. And some super interesting history. This guy was quite a character. At one point wanted to annex Canada. So didn't get away with that. So he was like, all right, Land Grant Act. So there are land grant universities in every state in the country. There are also more recently colleges established as historically black colleges and universities, and then even more recently in 1994, indigenous and tribal colleges, all established as part of the same family of universities. And Extension is part of that, and our part of that is part of the founding language that Justin Smith Morrill used was to establish at least one college in every state upon a sure and perpetual foundation, accessible to all. Is it fair? But especially to the sons of toil, where all the needful science for the practical avocations of life shall be taught, where neither the higher graces or classical studies nor the military drill of our country now so greatly appreciates will be entirely ignored, and where agriculture, the foundation of all present and future prosperity, may look for troops of earnest friends, studying its familiar and recondite economies, and at last elevating to that higher level where it may fearlessly invoke comparison with the most advanced standards of the world. So 1862, kind of a quiet time in our country's history, right? So military drill was big, agriculture was big, but it included classical studies, and it had this vision at the time that was unheard of about secondary education and continuing education accessible by all. And so that's something that drives Extension. We are the extension of the university, the land-grant university, into the communities, and the extension of the communities into the university. Is the university researching things that are beneficial, right? Are we asking the right questions? So that's our role. I see it as a two-way street. We bring research findings into the community, latest information about regenerative ag, no-till agriculture, watering tomatoes, right? But we also bring questions from the community back to the university. What's the future economic development pathways for a town like Bennington? You know, there are people studying these things in different locations. It doesn't need to just be people in Bennington. So we are funded about 13% federally by something called the Smith-Lever Act. And then the state matches that funding. So that's what we call our base funding. That amounts to about 40% of our funding currently for Extension. The balance of it is grants. So it's people like Kimberly and I going out and saying, we think a robotics project for youth in Bennington and other communities in the state might be beneficial. And we go and we get money to fund that, to make it happen. And so that's about 60% of our budget is grant funded. And so if you feel like Extension used to have more of a presence in your community, you're not just making that up. We did. Our funding has not kept up with times, and so we are often soft funded and going and getting this the grant monies, to do projects. We do our work in 4 result areas. They are sustainable agriculture, food, and forests. We probably just call that agriculture, and that's what most people know Extension for. Another one of our result areas is healthy families. So we actually have a series of family programs, family-oriented programs. 4-H is a big part of that. We also have a result area that captures the natural environment. So somebody mentioned climate change and water. Big time work going on at UVM, not just focused on Lake Champlain, but all throughout the state and all throughout the region, and in fact the world. So, and then capable communities. We have some work that's focused with local regional development corporations or regional commissions and other partners, trying to ensure that our communities are healthy and positioned for future success. And so what I have here, which is going to be really difficult to pantomime, is a grid of our programs. And we have 32 programs. Agricultural engineering is a program in Extension speak. But it really is everything from kids to compost, and from profit and loss statements to parks and recreation. It includes things like COPE, which is coping with separation and divorce. So that's a program we offered that helps people navigate the process of divorce and separation. We have programs that focus on agritourism. So it's not just agriculture as we knew it in 1862. It's agriculture that involves people coming to the farm to visit and stay for multiple nights and have an experience. We do a ton of work in maple, because maple is a big part of our state's economy. And we do a ton of work in dairy. Somebody I heard during lunch was mentioning how there are fewer and fewer farms. There are fewer and fewer dairies. Same number of cows, fewer dairies. So think about what that looks like as a business model, right? What's involved there? A lot of transitions. The agricultural demographic is aging. So and along with other parts of the state, other industries in the state, we're focused on who's the next generation to take that on. Other forms of agriculture, fruit and vegetable production is actually booming. There are new farms every week in Vermont, and oftentimes they're taking over some of the old dairy farm locations and turning it into vegetable production, which is kind of cool. So we cover a lot of ground, literally and figuratively. And so you're back. Would you like to say a little bit more about 4-H, or do you want me to?
Sure,
Okay.
yeah, I can. So I'll pick up a little bit of where Chris just left off, and actually part of our lunch conversation. So I talked about hey, 4-H isn't what it used to be because we're doing robots and we're evolving, but we also have to maintain those roots because of that next generation. So we do need to maintain connections to farming opportunities so that youth have a better understanding of where does milk come from, not the grocery store. Milk comes from cows, and cows eat grass, and grass means soil and water, and so there's the understanding systems so that we are all a part of those systems is key to 4-H education. And then that does transfer into whatever those systems are. It is just part of what we embed in the education that we provide. I think that's my biggest point that I wanted to just circle back on.
Talk about BAM.
Sure. So again, in Bennington, and with a bit of a focus on that STEM education, BAM, which is Bennington Area Makers, that is the housing space of 2 robotics clubs. And then also is work that we partner with to provide programming out of that space. So we have a club, and then it means that there's opportunities for youth to come back regularly, weekly, monthly, however they decide. But then we also will offer weekend workshops that are opportunities to tinker and explore something that maybe you will get into, or maybe there's another offering. So we had costuming workshops, robotics. There are also been other crafting and hands-on opportunities there, and those are also multi-generational, intergenerational, because that's also a piece of 4-H is a part of the community, and there's mentoring opportunities for adults to be connecting with youth so that we're all learning together, passing down knowledge, and also just having fun together. Okay, I think that's it.
Yeah, cool.
Thank you for letting me jump back in.
Well, great. So the Mary, I think it was mentioned, the window dressers program. So that's actually a program BAM is partnering with this fall. That Jeannie Jenkins has been really helpful in shepherding. We had a great gardening workshop, Grow Your Own Garden, and that was back May?
1st of June.
Beginning of June. And Marsh and Cindy were huge leaders helping pull that together. We had 92 people show up.
Wow.
And I want to thank Rotary for sponsoring that. So that was some of the support for that came from this club, as I understand it.
Yes.
I hope I got that right. And so that was a huge help to us. Again, 92 people came, learned about pollinators, learned about growing their own garden, what to do about soil, plant health. The other thing that we've done, some of you, I think, Mary, the other Mary, right?
Is Morrissey?
You remember the holiday lantern workshop? So if we had the slides shown, you'd see yourself. So we had a holiday lantern, yeah, right. Holiday lantern making, and this was amazing. I never would have thought this would have worked. This event would have worked. But we took tin cans from the cafeterias So like half-gallon tin cans all the way down to pints, and we filled them with water and froze them. And then you take them out and you put them on the table, and imagine a room half this size with maybe this many people in it with hammers and nails banging on these things to put patterns through the tin cans. And then we melt the water and put a little electric lantern inside, and we lit the pathway to the veterans' home for the tree lighting. And that's a great example of where, you know, we had people from all over the community, all different ages, and the common factor there was pounding nails through tin cans. It was awesome. So that's BAM, and I think actually, like I said, some of the folks in the room have been engaged in BAM programs. But that's a really good example of where Kimberly and I, we share an office downtown in Bennington, and we're doing our work, and it involves not just Bennington County. I have a statewide responsibility. But we're always thinking, what could the community benefit from, and how do we provide improved access for everybody to some of the work that we're doing and some of the things that others know how to do. And that's really what led to BAM's development, was this sort of community-based co-learning opportunity. So, yes, ma'am.
The number of programs and the variety are incredible, to the point I'm thinking, how do you do all those things? And I mean, are these a lot of employees? Is it volunteers? Because I mean, how would you know how to do dairy and gardening and robots and I don't know, knitting or something? You know?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking how my head would explode.
Never said we did them well. No, that's a great point.
How do you offer all that?
Yeah, so we have 11 offices throughout the state. We have about 150 employees. The employment mix is, we have a fair bit of part-time and temporary employees. We lean heavily on volunteers, for sure, especially when it comes to local community work and very specific project work. We just hired our first pollinator outreach specialist, be based out of Brattleboro for the state. And so that work is something that's always been sort of pieced together.
What is that?
Okay, yeah, great. So,
sounds like bees.
Yes, yeah, bees and other native pollinators. So honeybees are not native pollinators. They're the most popular,
Yeah.
but bumblebees, birds, lots of little wasps that actually do a ton of work for us that we just never even think about. And they're also, many of them are helpful for controlling pests on other crops. Yeah. So
you find someone that's knows about all of this and either get them to volunteer the course, or
in this case, it was somebody who had been working for UVM Extension as part of a Connecticut River watershed program. So this person was previously working on water quality, and in particular eutrophication, or runoff of nutrients from farms into the Connecticut River, and trying to abate that with some no-till agriculture and nutrient management planning and things like that. And this is a classic case of the funding for that project winds down. And here we have somebody who has relationships in the community, who has a technical agricultural connection to the land and knowledge, and what's next? And so that was a case where we said, well, what's next? Literally, let's ask what's next. What does the community need? And the question of pollinator-friendly habitat comes up all the time. And homeowners want to know, should I plant X or Y? Should I spray something or not? Or, I've got to do something, but I don't know what to do. And even places like the Department of Transportation, they don't love to spend money mowing the median strips on highways. And so many places, they're actually planting pollinator habitats. So, so that's a bit of what it's about. So this person will be developing this program. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I didn't want to downplay my cheese making experience. But
we know.
the reason, it was a full day course, and I didn't know anything about making cheese. I do now, and I really have an appreciation for what goes into it. And that course not only addressed the making of the cheese, but the history behind cheese and the different kinds of cheese. I think it was very informative. So, I mean, it wasn't a wasted day.
Yeah.
You're just not getting any cheese, that's all.
It's a good point. People sometimes ask, why would I need extension if I have Google? And it's a really good point, and it's a question I ask myself every time I think about what I'm doing over the next 2 to 4 years in terms of my program plan. And that's one of the key points, right? Because you will never get to that level of understanding off a web page. And if you do, you're going to be left wondering, is this the truth? Right? And so, at the very least, we're a fellow human being who has some grounding in science and research and connections to those who have even more grounding in science and research. We're in the community, we're establishing relationships and trust, trying to get more close to the truth. And so trying to make those experiences more beneficial. Other questions, other thoughts about things, knowing what you know now that UVM and UVM Extension could or should be working on?
You covered it all.
So I want to know what a recondite economy is, because I've never run into one of those.
Yeah, me either. Isn't that what we're in right now?
I don't know.
It's Bitcoin.
Oh, really?
No.
Is it the truth? No.
Beth?
I would love a course on vermicomposting.
Yeah.
Because that was something that we undertook during the pandemic, and I've heard that a lot of other folks did. Lots of science experiments went on at home, right?
Yeah.
While we were there so much. And people have had really different experiences, like issues with flies versus, and that just seems like it could be cool.
I believe it is covered as part of the Master Composter certification.
Master compost.
So you and Matt can arm wrestle over who really is more masterful now.
All right.
Yeah.
It'll be me.
Yeah. But that's a great point. And also thinking about, the other thing that I try to think about is, so we have these Master Gardener courses, Master Compost courses. Those are commitments.
Yeah.
What's the more accessible form of that? That's something we need to think about. Come up with better resources for sure.
Introductory, right? We don't
Yeah.
need to be masters.
Yeah.
but we-
What's the 3-minute YouTube version? Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any new exciting programs coming up?
Yeah, so probably the most exciting new program that I think I have coming up right now is the Youth Robotics program here in Bennington through BAM. We just had our first season meeting last night. We don't even know what the competition is yet, but man, oh man, 7 kids in a room talking robots is amazing. And the hardest part is not being that kid, and learning with, for me anyway. So I say it's hard, but I love it too.
Is there an opportunity that people in the community can come at the end of it
So
to see it and have what they've created?
I would love if you would, at a future meeting, invite the robotics team to come talk to you about their work.
Talk to me.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, yep. Because I asked them last night, not knowing, I said, there's no promises, but would you like to go to speak in public to people you don't know? And they said, yeah.
Just gonna ask her.
Great.
It's
Yeah.
almost like
That'd be a great program.
where we don't know about it, the wonderful things going
Yeah.
on.
That's a good one. Last year was our first year, tough year to do anything for the first time. But part of the first tech challenge this robotics challenge involves outreach and promotion. So part of it, it's not just about programming, it's not just about making motors run, it's about going and talking to people about what you've done, so and it's exciting, great to be part of.
I always love to hear about Beth's stories and her chickens.
Yes.
And I see a lot of
Me too.
people in neighborhoods with chickens. I would love to learn how to have chickens, but we have foxes and other things around, so I don't want to necessarily harm them. Is that 4-H, or is that who do you start to learn that from?
Certainly, if there are any youth in your neighborhood or other youth connections you have who share that interest, that's an amazing 4-H opportunity, and there are active.
No, there's only old people on that.
Okay. In that case. But there definitely are, so the other thing that I sort of went over quickly is we're part of a national organization, right? So we're UVM Extension, and our loyalty is to UVM first and to Vermont first, but we're part of a national organization, the land grant university system, and there are extensions all over the country, some of whom are in places where poultry is the dominant industry. And so their 4-H programs are all about poultry, or they have really strong 4-H programs in poultry, and they have really strong home backyard chicken, backyard poultry programs. So as a result, the first thing I do is look up backyard chickens extension. And what you'll probably find is a University of Georgia publication that's going to walk you through it, or a video that's going to walk you right through it, or North Carolina. It's probably one of those two states, but it's out there. And my sort of the thing I tend to do most when looking for something like that, add the word extension to your search term, and see where it's coming from, and make sure if it's from an extension organization, you have that trust to some degree. So.
Here's a quick question for Kimberly. How did you transfer your skills in architecture to what you're doing now?
Okay, 30-second version.
Yeah.
So we talked, the word master was thrown around a few times. So when I went through architecture training, I was trained that architects are the master builder. And I'm sure, I don't know how many or if any there are architects in the room or recovering architects.
We do have one.
So who's?
Jane.
So we're also told we can do anything. Like, or at least through school, I was told you can do anything. You can do anything. You're given the tools to create, to think critically, to problem solve, to work within a community, to build relationships because you are in service, because you have the tools to figure things out, to house someone. So that was me leaving college in 2008 in Philadelphia, and the bottom fell out. I graduated in 2006, I won't lie about my age. And so then it became how do I use these tools and serve community and relate to folks in these ways, but in ways that I can survive on. So I became an organic farmer and lived in the Hudson Valley and learned how to do no-till ag. And that I loved it because that was just taking architectural skills and building cities that were full of vegetables and irrigation systems, and all of the people I was serving were plant people, and then I got to harvest those plant people and serve human people. And so it kind of just went from there, and then that I actually learned in that I loved education, and my experience of being able to take tools and apply them to different ways of being led me to education and agriculture, UVM Extension.
Sounds good. Yeah. Well, it is 1:30 when we traditionally wrap up, but if anybody has any questions, can you guys stick around for a little bit? Of course.
Thank you.